Ladies, gentlemen, and friends beyond the binary, welcome to the Monday Discourse for today, April 5th, 2021. I'm your host, Tristan. I stream on Mondays and Tuesdays. Mondays, I do the Monday Discourse, usually with Mia Mulder from 12 till 2. She's not going to be here today. She is ill, so you're stuck with just me. Sorry, friends. And on Tuesday nights from 7 to 9, I do Step Back Tonight, which is a stream with just me, but I'm trying to get that more guest-filled, if that makes sense. Phoebe, we're going to have to talk about you trying to eat This is Phoebe, by the way, my cat, who's trying to eat my headphone cables, and I keep trying to stop her. But she's determined to eat them. I go by he, him pronouns, and you can find my work at stepbackhistory.com or tristanwon'tshutup.com. And if you want to support my work, you can go to patreon.com/stepbackhistory. Or you can drop me a subscription with Twitch. If you have Amazon Prime, you get one free Twitch Prime subscription per month. So if you don't use it, Amazon just gets to keep your money. So please use it to help Step Back or any of the multiple Twitch channels that are doing great work and not getting paid enough. As for updates on where I am, this month is interesting because I have 2 videos with like due dates that are around the same time. So I'm trying to slowly work on 2 videos at once. One I'm a bit further ahead on at the moment because it's, but I'm trying to do an interview for it. So I'm kind of like, it's kind of on pause for maybe the next couple days. And then the other one I'm working on is reading a book for it right now. So we're going to be getting some content, but it might be a little bit. It might be like a few weeks. You know, these things take work. If you want to submit questions for future streams, I'm going to put a link in the chat that you can go to fill things out. And yeah, just put that in there. Make sure to indicate which streams that you watch regularly, so or who the questions are for, etc., etc. So that's a whole thing. And also, if this is Step Back just passed 88,000 subscribers this morning, so if you are new to this channel, please make yourself known in the chat because we have a very great chat community on both Twitch and YouTube. So please make yourself known. Say hello. All right, I think. Hey. Miss the times I do my live screenings? I do. I stream on Mondays and Tuesdays. Mondays from 12 till 2 Eastern, and Tuesdays from 7 to 9 Eastern. Alrighty. Oh, so what do we got? What happened this week? What is the week's news? The only like news story that I picked up this morning is it's possible that DMX is not going to live much longer. That he's like on life support and in like in a vegetative state or something. That's the only news story that I know. Let's take a look. Let's see what else is going on. COVID is airborne. Oh, that's fun. ASHRAE Epidemic Task Force releases updated airborne transmission guidelines. Okay. Let's see what this says. N95 respirators are required? Holy moly. DMX, like the rapper. Yeah. He over the weekend, he overdosed. And he's been in the hospital for a few days now. Wasn't COVID already airborne? Well, the idea was that it was used particulates and micro droplets, in which case, like, that would mean that it doesn't like float in the air, like say like the flu does. So COVID means so being airborne means that it's even easier to transmit. Oh boy. I'm trying to find the statement on COVID being airborne. So this is from ASHRAE, which I don't know what this is. The ASHRAE Epidemic Task Force releases updated airborne transmission guidance. ASHRAE Epidemic Task Force released a updated, unequivocal statement on the airborne transmission of SARS-CoV-2 in buildings. ASHRAE released the following statement. Airborne transmission of SARS-CoV-2 is significant and should be controlled. Changes to building operations, including the operation of heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems, can reduce airborne exposure. Replaces the April 2020 statement that said airborne transmission was sufficiently likely that airborne precautions should be taken. At the time, both the WHO and the Centers for Disease Control contended that transmission of COVID was by droplet and fomite modes, not airborne. Subsequently, both have acknowledged the risk of airborne transmission indoors. This may seem like a small step, but we feel it's important and no doubt about our position, given the muted support for ventilation and filtration as important tools in the effort to stop the pandemic. Okay. Airborne COVID would be... Well, what this is basically saying is that it's been airborne this whole time. It always has been. Smaller droplets stay in the air longer and therefore can carry the virus in the air. Okay. The anti-lockdown people are going to have fun with this info? Yeah. The first reply to this tweet that shows the report is somebody saying, well, it means that the cloth masks don't work anymore, so stop wearing masks. We got big bread tube drama on Sunday? What bread tube drama happened on Sunday? I don't even know what that was. I didn't hear anything. But then again, I spent Sunday gloriously not on Twitter, so it kind of helped me out quite a bit. It's not just someone liking a bad tweet. Okay. Well, let's hear it. What's the story? I need a link or something. Anyways, some YouTuber I don't know about human trafficking. What? What about human trafficking? That's a kind of intense word. What? Is this, what's it called? I thought I saw something about Mike from PA talking about this. I thought they were talking about Beau Biden. But I guess Beau Biden is dead, isn't he? So that would make a lot more sense. Okay, well, I don't know what the details are on that, so I guess I shouldn't comment, but, Hey, Rostafarian, thank you for following up. Thank you. Let's see. Did you hear about the attempted coup in Jordan? No, I haven't. I don't know what's going on in Jordan. Man, this is just going to be like, have you heard of this thing that I hadn't heard about? Because I spent my weekend vibing. I had a major breakthrough in my organizational structure, which is that I found out that the program I use to basically be a cybernetic version of my executive function for ADHD stuff has a mobile app that syncs through Wi-Fi with the desktop app. And so now I don't have to be on the computer all the time. It's pretty fun. And then, not being on the computer has been much more enjoyable than being on it. My background looks like the Imperial German flag. I've got the anarchist flag. Where is Imperial German? No Mia. Nope, no Mia. What's the app called? It's called MLO, or My Life Organized 3. It's sort of the only high feature task tracking software that you can get that's not on Macintosh or Apple or whatever. It's sort of like the best version of OmniFocus that you can have if you don't have if you're not completely plugged into the Apple ecosystem. Nope, Phoebe. Hey. Alrighty. Enjoying some coffee. So, what we got going on the internet? Oh boy, so I'm not going to comment on whatever this Beau fifth column story is. So I'm not a good politics streamer because I don't have the impulse to go off half-cocked about a subject that I've only heard a little bit about is the thing. That's like my problem. Hasn't been like the year of coups, like there was the Armenian coup attempt, and then there's the Jordanian coup attempt. Jesus Christ. Yeah, it's true. See, the thing is, when I think of like white, red, and black, I think of like the White Stripes. Didn't they? Their big album when I was in high school, like, was all white, black, and red themed. I can think of like the theme or the music video for Seven Nation Army. Hey, Zane, thank you for the super chat. Have you been watching the Amazon union vote in Alabama? Tangentially, it's a good thing. The propaganda has been absolutely ridiculous from Amazon's part. So, I'd be I know that the vote is over and now they're counting it, but that's the last I heard. I don't know what the results have been or if they've been announced yet. But I have a feeling that I would know if it would be all over the internet if it came out. White, red, and black. Yeah, Egypt is those colors too. I forgot. But as you can see, it's just the anarchist colors. That's the thing, is there's like maybe like 5 colors that flags use. And so you can just take any combination of colors and you're going to end up being like, oh, that's this country. Like, you use orange, white, and green, and it's like, is this Ireland? Is this India? If that orange is red, then all of a sudden it's Italy. Like, I don't know. So what's the first question I got here? Is religion compatible with socialism and communism? Sorry if this is a dumb question. I am new to the left. Well, it's not a dumb question, Addison. It's a good question. It's a question that a lot of people are still trying to answer. But I would basically be more under the impression that it's not incompatible. There have been many people who hold religious beliefs and have been communists and socialists for as long as there has been communists and socialists. Many socialist movements that have made great change or, are advocating for great liberty for humanity have been deeply rooted in religious traditions. The first one that comes to mind is like in Central and South America, liberation theology, which is a largely Catholic-led socialist movement that like actually has had like nuns and like priests and the current pope as part of it. So it's most definitely like religion and having left-wing politics are not at odds with each other, no matter what people will try to say. people who who have an axe to grind about their own personal religious trauma will try to make the argument that you can't, that religion is incompatible with it, and usually in doing so are trying to justify brutal repression and the authoritarian cracking down on people's personal freedom and their core identity, which that's not incompatible with communism either, but it's not exactly the kind of communism that I'm into. So yeah. What happens most often is that a lot of religious canon has extensive writing that would be socialist through any other lens, but ignore people tend to ignore the parts about religion that don't advance their economic agenda, and so you end up with like true Christians who, like, if you're a Christian and you're not a socialist, it's sort of a problem because there's a whole Bible that basically is a screed against rich people and the evils of greed. So there you go. Have I read The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin? Just finished. It provides a mind-blowing perspective on anarchism. I have read it. I probably have to read it again. But, yeah. Matthew 19:24. The Bible is a most anti-rich doc. Peter Kropotkin my favorite anarchist? No, he isn't. He's pretty good. Like, I like his theories and his ideas a bit, but I am very much into, as you can see here, Emma Goldman, who has a lot of developments on Peter Kropotkin's work that I'm a very big fan of. Like, Peter Kropotkin's work is great, and a lot of what Emma Goldman's writings are in addition to instead of in spite of. Like, there's not a lot of things that Kropotkin and Emma Goldman disagreed upon, but Emma Goldman did have a lot of writings that were about the emphasis of joy and pleasure in the sort of liberation and the revolutionary ideal. The whole, if I can't dance to it, then it's not my revolution type thing is pretty important to me. And that anarchist theory is great, but it should be rooted in the desire to bring the joys and the joys and pleasures of liberty and freedom to everybody, and that's going to not be built by being extremely self-serious. And also, there's a few kind of American sort of ideals that she brought to it that Kropotkin didn't emphasize very much. Like, one of the things that Emma Goldman made a big deal about is emphasizing freedom of thought and freedom of speech within socialist movements, which at the time that she was writing, when it was the Soviet Union was the big thing that everyone was talking about, where people were super they thought that things emphasizing freedom of religion, freedom of thought, freedom of speech, those were just secondary bourgeois concerns. You can't, what's the thing I wrote for the Cold War video? You can't eat liberty and you can't clothe your children in freedom, that kind of a thing. And yes, Emma Goldman also brought in a lot of feminism. That is true. That liberty includes things like the freedom of anarchist freedom should include things like family planning and gender equality and those kinds of things. Things that I think Kropotkin wasn't against, but he also didn't have strong emphasis for. Mostly because he was a man. So yeah, big fan. Would recommend. Any good book recommendations on the history of Indigenous Americans, Canadians, Australians? A good one that I always like to point out are there's sort of like a 2-book series by Charles C. Mann. Both of them are very big, very thick books, but they're written really well, and they have a lot of really great it's not like one long slog. It's like multiple things. So you can read a chapter and put it down for like a month and a half and come back to it and read another chapter, that kind of a thing. And those are the books 1491 and 1493. Those are 1491 is sort of a survey of the Americas it's a survey of the Americas at the eve of Columbus's voyage, at the eve of the Columbian Exchange, and what the history of these societies and what like we know about it with like modern archaeology and stuff like that. Pretty good book. 1491, pretty solid book. And then 1493 is the sort of sequel to it, which is a book about the really coming to terms with the greater impact of the Columbian Exchange as it's had on the planet and all sorts of things like world trade and our material reality, and even things like the diet that we eat, that there's like entire like about how New World plants affected the globe, how things like worms are an invasive species to the Americas and have completely changed the landscape, and that there's like biological processes that the Columbian Exchange have impacted upon the Earth that we are still feeling, and still sort of like transitions that haven't even completely finished yet. And so that's sort of they're both really good books, and I really highly recommend both of them. They're solid. So much so that like me just even talking about them makes me want to reread them. So you always found it kind of weird that anarchist thought required the abolition of the state to achieve an ideal society. Well, you can't really have a society that is equal, where all people are considered equal, unless if you have a monolithic organization that has the self-given right to use violence to coerce people to do what it wants them to do. And if you have an organization that, like, if you think about what the state is a non-voluntary organization. You are born into it. You can't choose to leave. You can't, choosing to leave or choosing to join is a major process, and you are instantly opted in without any options. They have arbitrary rules that are placed over a certain landmass, and if you violate those rules, they have self-given themselves the permission to use violence to suppress your life, including the right to kill you if they so desire. They're basically an organization that, at the end of the day, claims to own you. It is ownership. You do not own yourself; the state owns you. And so, really, you can't have a equal society unless you remove this infrastructure. So, even if you saw, like, in the Soviet Union, the apparently, the apparent, like, egalitarian, like, vanguard organization of the communist project, created itself a political elite. You had like high up ranking people in the Communist Party enjoying benefits and privileges that your average worker, especially people in the Soviet Union who lived in the periphery, the life of a Muscovite party insider was much more nice than, say, it was much more full of the daily pleasures of life than, say, a farmer living in Uzbekistan, you know? And just a second, I gotta close the door. And so... And, the Soviet Union notoriously, what's it called? It maintained its own organization through mass violence and suppression of individual rights. The fact that, people were, they had banned music and they had banned, all forms of culture from the outside. They had, severe restrictions on people's ability to express their religious beliefs, and maintained a system of fucking prison camps in Siberia. So, Not that the Soviet Union wasn't a lot better than what it replaced. And, it had very ambitious aims. It's just that when you create a hierarchy, hierarchies basically want to constantly reinforce themselves. So if you replace one hierarchy with another hierarchy, you're just going to, maintain more hierarchy. The Gulag Archipelago is not a very well-researched book. It is not. I'm never going to recommend the Gulag Archipelago. It's part of the bullshit of the Black Book of Communism narrative, and they're both very poorly researched books. You don't have to, buy into pro-capitalist, far-right, anti-socialist hack jobs in order to acknowledge that the Soviet Union was a profoundly unfree society that had an extremely authoritarian state that restricted a lot of people's freedoms. Now, their quality of life was definitely a lot better, especially if you were in the sort of the metropole regions of the Soviet Union. But it still was it wasn't. It was not as profoundly egalitarian. Especially when it came to hierarchies created through the state and things like that. And you see this in modern day self-described socialist states. You've got there's market benefits in China for being a member of the party, being a party member, and there's serious, huge benefits with in North Korea with being a party member. That there's well documented things of foods and grocery stores and clothing and schools that you can only really get access to if you're a member of the party. So, this. If you had a communist revolution in 1917, since the country was already industrialized, would it have turned out better? Maybe. I do think that if there was a 1917 revolution in the USA, given the state of the labor movement at that period in U.S. history, there would have been some severe issues when it comes to the racial segregation and the racial caste system in America that would need to be confronted. But if there was a revolution in America, it would have been led by the labor movement, and the labor movement basically didn't let black people join them at that point in history. So there would be some problems that would arise from that, I would think, especially when it comes to things like how would that revolution treat areas of the country that were primarily agricultural and didn't have strong unionization, because a lot of agricultural workers were people of color who were not allowed in unions, like in the American South, where you had a bunch of sharecroppers who were more or less peasants. There wasn't, even if America was industrialized in 1917, parts of America were still very much not industrialized. And even when the Soviet Union was formed, there were parts of all of the Soviet Union wasn't super industrialized, but when they did industrialize, they focused on certain parts of the country. And then there were other parts that were very much not industrialized, and they kind of languished as being peripheral to the overall project. Like, if you were a Central Asian Tartar, if you were a Kazakh, your access to material goods was severely limited compared to somebody who lived in some of the major cities like Moscow or Petrograd or Stalingrad or Volgograd, or I think I just named the same city multiple times, but Leningrad, that is another one. The old name for St. Petersburg. So, this you can be left wing and be understand these things in a critical manner. You don't have to go to bat to viciously defend the Soviet Union, because you're going to end up taking yourself to some pretty yikes places if you do that. Volgograd is Stalingrad. Yeah, I think Volgograd is what Stalingrad's called today. And then Petrograd, I think, is a different city. I don't even know what Petrograd's called today, or if it even has its name changed. And Leningrad is what St. Petersburg is today. But very Soviet to call a city basically Petrograd is Leningrad is St. Petersburg. Okay, there you go. Wow. Is there an argument to be made that individualist anarchism will lead us back into capitalism? I mean, to an extent, individualist anarchism is... So, if you want to know, a little bit of the history of anarchist theory, individualist anarchism is sort of a independently developed American form of anarchist theory. It's essentially what 19th century anarchist thinkers in the United States started thinking about, which is anarchism with a emphasis on individual liberty and those kinds of things, as opposed to kind of where anarchist theory was going in Europe at the time, which was much more steeped in Marxism and communist theory, and sort of fits syndicalism and anarcho-communism and those kinds of things. And that I would argue that the anarchists that I really find interesting are the ones who were Europeans who immigrated to America and sort of ingested both of those intellectual currents, where they have an individualist anarchism that is also heavily steeped in Marxist theory and socialism. I feel like those that was the strongest form of anarchism that I felt attached to, while those who did not make a Hegelian synthesis with their friends over in Europe, ended up becoming the intellectual forefathers of what would become basically the anarcho-capitalists and libertarians, and these are the writers that Hayek and the Chicago Boys and stuff like that were reading to sort of make their libertarian ideology that is very prevalent in America today. So this is there's a lot of ways to talk it through, and anarchism is also an intellectual history, just like all the other ones. There's not just But yeah, if there's a thing about individualist anarchism leading to capitalism, you're not wrong, because those who came from the individualist anarchist tradition, who did not have conversation with socialist stuff like that, with socialism and communism, and therefore didn't take a material aspect, then embraced a lot of like free market neoclassical conservative stuff, and are basically the intellectual forefathers of modern day libertarians, who are the most capitalists. So, yeah. What do you think about the legacy of non-Western capitalists like Frank Fernandez of Cuba and Bhagat Singh of India? Honestly, I would need to read their work. That's about all I can say. Do people who lived in St. Petersburg in the Soviet era actually call it Leningrad? I think so. I imagine they would. Something makes me think that the government wouldn't have let them do otherwise. So, because St. Petersburg is not only religious, but it's like a symbol of a pre-revolutionary Russia, which you can't have. The next question I got here is, would there be any benefit to a united North and South Carolina? And the answer to that is no, I don't think so. Nothing sticks out. It's not like it's a particularly rural state or anything like that. All it would result in is there being less political representation in the Senate for them. That's about the and it would have, like, maybe there's something going on in the Carolinas that I don't know about in the southern lowland area, but I don't see a reason that they need to be made into a single political polity that would benefit either Carolinians or American federal politics or anything like that. The Petrograd was the name that they gave to St. Petersburg during World War I to make it less German. That makes sense. Goes to show it's hard to overcome a Western bias. I feel like, yeah, there's something to that. Especially because, like, a lot of times, like, theorists are hard to get a hold of because their work has either not been translated, or if it's been translated by a hobbyist, and it might not be the most high quality of translation. And you can probably guess that there's not that much of an economic incentive for, like, publishing companies to publish or to translate works of, like, leftist theory into English, something like that. And so, yeah. The whole thing about so people saying that the whole, like, if you believe in socialism, then why you use iPhone? And all I can think is, like, isn't, like, almost like every patent that the iPhone utilized something that was developed through government research? And so it's like, you say you believe in capitalism, yet you use an iPhone, which was largely developed by government research grants. So I don't know. Phoebe, you have been so squirrely today. I've been, like, doing this whole stream, and she's had the major zoomies. She's been just running around the office and crawling on things. I don't know what the deal is. Yeah. Everyone loves you. You don't even know that they exist. You were zen. You were a zen empty. What would you recommend as political literature for a beginner who just got into leftist literature? I would still always say The Conquest of Bread. It's very accessible. It lays out the needs for left wing politics and for anarchism in specific. It lays out the case that not only is anarchism like a desirable political mode, but that revolution is going to need to take care of people's material concerns, and that primarily a lot of the more egalitarian forms of human existence throughout history have been basically anarchist in nature. And so I always think the conquest of bread is a good way to start. It's always the first political it's always the first political text for leftists that I would recommend. We should improve society somewhat. Yet you participate in society. I am very intelligent. What's the oldest welfare state in the world? Isn't it like Germany or something weird like that? Like, didn't the Prussian Empire create some some basic social safety net programs like in the 19th century that sort of the rest of the world borrowed off of? I can't remember. But there's probably something older that I don't remember. What's your favorite pre-modern historical era? Mine is the Bronze Age. It's a good question. Pre-modern. I don't know. The answer's not coming to me right away. What's this question we got here? Whenever I want to construct an alternate history scenario where a presidential election goes a different way, I always just say the guy who won IRL got hit in the head got in a coma right before the election. Do you buy that FDR or Nixon having potential brain damage would be enough for Hoover or McGovern to win? Hoover or McGovern? All right, so I think that things were pretty bad for Hoover. I don't think him getting reelected was ever going to be if FDR got shot or something and they just replaced him with some other random Democrat at the end, I think he would have won. Just because people were pretty fucking pissed off at Hoover by the end of his term. And trying to remember the McGovern election. That's the trying to remember McGovern versus Nixon. So that would have been 1974. That was another one where the Republicans were in a pretty strong situation. And I do think, and the Democrats were in a pretty bad situation. They were still licking their wounds from 68. So I would say probably replacing 72. Sorry. Yeah. I would probably say that a lot of the Democratic Party was pretty much tearing itself apart in the early 70s, where you had essentially the Southern conservative Democratic Party had basically had it with the Democratic Party and were openly defecting to the Republicans, and the Democratic Party needed a long time to work out a new coalition. So I don't think that the situation in which I don't know if there would have been a situation in which the Democrats could have won in the 72 election, given the kind of context of the situation, everything like that. That's how I would put it anyway. Is it unrealistic to depict a sci-fi future where present-day capitalism still exists? No. I mean, depends upon how far in the future. But if you want to take a Marxist look at it, I almost I almost had science fiction ideas where capitalism has persisted for a few more centuries because instead of facing the kind of crises of our energy crisis specifically, the crisis of infinite growth. The idea for me was like, instead of facing that crisis like grown-ups, we decided to go to space and just have the infinite expansion of space to be the next thing. But like, with the like the kind of like paradox of infinite resources, post scarcity stuff, would capitalism still exist? I mean, it wouldn't be very functional. But superstructures are, very complex, and superstructures have a way of sticking around, and capitalism has shown itself to be very adaptable to situations. So I could totally see it happening. 23rd century, so you're talking about like the Expanse, how the Expanse still has capitalism. I mean, the Expanse shows that like they don't live in a post-scarcity economy. In the Expanse's universe, I don't think this is realistic, but in the Expanse's universe, the resource scarcity of things like the resource scarcity brought about by essentially overpopulation on Earth is causing for, and also the lack of like, things you need on Earth in outer space being limited in supply. Like, capitalism persists in like the Expanse universe because like in the asteroid belt you don't have access to like soil and plants and animals, and like things like oxygen and water need to be mined and refined instead of just pumped out of the ground easily. So, and then they have an economy by basically shipping water to like Mars or something, right? So I guess like, yeah, there are ways that you dealing with like space shit, then yeah, you could definitely see the capitalism trying to persist in something like that. They're setting up company towns on Mars. Do you buy that sort of thing? Yeah. Given like with like Elon, look, given the state of like how like governments are starting to cut back on anything except for having a big military and police force, like those are the only things that they'll spend government money on, and that all of like you've got like, we're hitting the kind of technology threshold where private corporations are starting to take an interest in space exploration as part of their model of profit making. That I could totally see, like, if Mars is not settled by a government exploration program, but is instead done by like, I don't know, SpaceX or something, then yeah, the company towns on Mars will definitely be a thing. You thought that was against international law? I mean, you say that, but like, them and what army? Like, if somebody lands on Mars and says, I own Mars, and they'll be like, that's a violation of the UN Outer Space Treaty of 1962 or whatever, like, they'll be like, all right, come and take it. Like, I think that, like, a lot of those, like, very high-minded space treaties, the second they end up being tested by, like, an actual, when rubber hits the road over these things, I think that they're gonna, a lot of them are not gonna stand up really well. You can't own something on another planet. That is currently the UN law, but I doubt it's going to be very enforceable. Like, I see a future in the not too distant future where the government essentially only exists to the government only exists as a security service for massive megacorps. Like, that's essentially a future we're moving towards, where the only things the government actually does is have police, and is basically function as police and military. And they essentially only exist to use violence to enforce maintain the profit margins of megacorps. And I could see that, like, even if they broke the law, them not enforcing it or doing anything. And then if there was like an uprising against the company towns on Mars, that if anything, the Earth would send military troops to put down that uprising because the way we're moving, governments don't particularly care. I mean, governments never really care about the people that are under them. That's why they're governments. Governments are for maintaining control through violence over the people that they're dominating over. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a state. It would be anarchism, and peace would break out everywhere. But instead, governments are interested in maintaining the governing hierarchy of the society that they're in. So we keep on this, like, this wave of capitalism, then their interest will be in maintaining the power of the capitalist ruling class. It's all just one class dominating another class using violence. Always has been. It's a very sad version of the future I do not wish on anyone. Yeah. So in my estimation, if I'm going to predict the long-term future of humanity, which is, always a fool's errand, but I would come to one of two conclusions, which is, one, we're either going to hit a breaking point by basically complete ecological collapse. I don't really we're almost at the point where there's not that much that people can do to oppose the will of the state. The state now has weapons that are far beyond anything that the average humans can do, and don't even require that many humans to operate anymore. And so the state is, the state will always will try to maintain its power base, and they will use whatever means necessary to maintain it. So I don't see the state willingly giving, I don't see a way to break the state, and I don't see the state giving up power willingly. So at this point, the only way I can see it is either the state completely falls apart because of ecological collapse, or they don't fall apart and we figure something out to deal with ecological collapse, and capitalism goes into space. And at that point, I don't know what happens at that point. Want to, yeah. Suppose you were going to make a video about the history / entomology. Entomology? You mean etymology? I don't think the N-word is an insect. Etymology of the N-word. Would you avoid using the word in the video even if it risks making that video confusing? I think there's easy ways to write around that. If you were to make that video. Nice try, attempter, to find a way to justify using a white person saying the N-word. You tried once again. Once again, you failed. Debate. Oh man, you want me to debate people? Oh, that's cute. Debate apostate prophet. Oh my god. I'm not gonna debate people. Sorry, not a thing I like to do. I would rather like clean my face with sandpaper than spend 5 minutes with crypto-fascist Sargon of Akkad. So you disagree with Mexi's prediction that capitalism only has like 2 decades left? I don't know. Maybe things will change. But we'll see. I'm maybe a little bit more pessimistic than Mexi is. If the current power structure realizes that capitalism has an expiry date, that is honestly sometimes a little bit more scary to me, because most oligarchs will come to the conclusion that if capitalism has an expiry date, then the next step is obviously fascism in my head, is doubling back on like fascist rhetoric in order to maintain power, because in the end they still have power. And the issue in this, and this is the part that I think is important to mention, is like, it's power is in hierarchy is the whole thing, and those who are on the upper end of the hierarchy focus, like, the entire reason they exist is to maintain and reinforce and amplify their power over others. So if their justification for unequal distribution of resources being, I was smart and rich, and therefore I built a corporation that stood the test of time, or whatever, if that excuse no longer works for them to, dominate over people, then they're going to move on to the next thing, which is going to be either racial identity or national identity or something like that. Because otherwise, fascism is sort of like, is when you move, when capitalists can't justify their own existence anymore, they move to racial identity and nationalism as their way to cling on to power. And that's probably going to be the next step. Because the idea of the government willingly giving up its power, or the people having the resources and coercive power to make the state give up its power, neither seem to be likely situations. So there's already like all of the fact that now we're like obsessing over borders, that is already talking about it. Like, that is already like the next step of our move towards a sort of like fascist thing, post-capitalist fascism. Like the fact that the fact that the Democratic Party, the Democratic president, the person who you were considered a sexist or racist or both for not supporting this extremely old white man's bid for infinite power, now is just maintaining a system of concentration camps at the U.S. border. And like as the ecological, as like basically the life support systems of the planet start to die, as mass desertification and the countries, that the amount of area on Earth that humans can safely live in starts to diminish, you're going to have massive refugee crises. There's ideas that as many as 1 billion people are going to be as many as 1 billion people are already refugees, and there might be another 1 billion or 2 billion over the next couple decades. In which case, like, the predominant thing you're going to see that is going to lead to fascist governments is going to be the big political change, the biggest material change that's happening in that age, which will be refugee crises, which is like going to define the 21st century, as people have to learn how to resettle on a planet that has much less habitable space than it did before. And it's one thing, and the response has been what's being called fortress politics, which is the politics of being extremely harsh when it comes to enforcing borders. and to sort of build as big a wall around whatever assets a state has left, and keeping the masses who are just trying to find a place to live where they have food and water, which is becoming more scarce, are going to try and be left out. And that is going to be extremely violent and extremely brutal. So, yeah. Let's see where it goes. Doesn't fascism have an expiration date too? Probably, but I don't know what comes after that because I can't really see the future that far. Do you think that Passatists are onto something? I don't know. So Passatists, if I remember correctly, I haven't like read Passad, but like from what I know about Passadist ideology or Passadist thought is that, first of all, they're the two things, which is that one, communism is a scientific fact of economics and inevitable. So any sufficiently advanced alien life is going to be communist, which means that we're going to run into a bunch of communist UFO people, aliens, or something at some point. And two, the main thing I think that a lot of people talk about when they talk about Passadism is that essentially the capitalist order is so hegemonic that the only real way to build a actual communist society is essentially to push the reset button with nuclear weapons. So we need to like destroy most of humanity to break down all of the states and the capitalist economies, and then when we rebuild, we can rebuild as communists. Which, like, you know, not a thing I would be super happy with, obviously. It would be nice if, like, you know, we could do socialism, if the government would actually let socialists get elected, but it's obvious that like the self-reinforcing system has pretty effectively been put in place to prevent any actual like democratic socialist transition of power. You know, the United States has pretty much destroyed any chance, like the Democratic Party, which might have been a vessel for some sort of left-wing politics, has pretty much, after the 2020 primaries, made it very clear that they are never going to accept any right-of-center politics. Even moderate social democrats are considered beyond the pale and not allowed in American politics. And unfortunately, unless you can get in on the one of the two big tent parties, you basically have no political voice in the U.S., especially now. So, the next, and I don't see, like, even, and that's just in America, but like the rest of the world, like Canada's so busy sanctioning like the only prominent leftist in the NDP right now because she did a live stream with Jeremy Corbyn, and the the UK just had its one left-wing party tear itself apart because half of it wants to just be conservatives, and the other half is like moving into northern particularist like independence movements. So like can you imagine a scenario catastrophic enough to lead to the destruction of the state, but not so catastrophic the world isn't too destroyed for us to build socialism after? I mean, yeah, but it would have to be pretty bad. Like, it would wipe out almost all of humanity at that point. Hmm. But, this is where we are, obviously. What if capitalism does turn out to be eternal? I mean, if capitalism is going to not be eternal, because at the end of the day, even in the most like absolutely insane measures of the universe, right? Like we are like you can't have infinite growth in a finite universe. So at some point, you can't just infinitely grow the economy forever. Whether that limit is terrestrial or solar system or galaxy or universe, at some point you can't just keep expanding the economy to produce more and more gizmos. And also, the incentives of capitalism to reduce the wages of the waged workforce will always be at odds with its desire to make profits, because you need waged workforces to have money in order to buy things. So that internal contradiction is always going to be getting bigger. It always hits some sort of fever pitch, and then some sort of catastrophe happens, and it needs to be reset with some sort of major redistribution of wealth, like what happened in the 1930s with the New Deal, or social welfare programs that happened around a lot of the Western world after World War II. And you're saying socialism is probably never happening. I don't know. There's always hope. It's just I don't see a strong, viable path right now, unless something seriously changes. My hope is that I'm wrong and that I'm not considering something, which is possible. I'm just a dude with a couple master's degrees in history. It's not like I am some sort of scenario specialist or some sort of super expert in, I'm trying to even remember, psychohistory, I think is what it's called, right? The people from the Foundation series who predict the future or whatever. I am very likely wrong about something or other, and that will change things. I'm also just an incredibly pessimistic person right now, so it's also that. Saying we can't get rid of the state without the world borderline being destroyed, right? I mean, if there might be options out. There is dual power programs that have to do with essentially creating our own institutions to combat the functions of the state and sort of wither it away in that function. Whether or not the violence of the state would be able to fight against that, I don't know, but. Nothing short term. That's my answer. Nothing short term. I would be very happy for something new to make something go wrong, but at the moment, it's pretty hegemonic, and it seems like people have pretty much fully ingested learned helplessness and have. At this point, now that we're a full generation into it, completely given up on the idea that politics can meaningfully change. That's why now we're fighting about, the Marvel movies and shit like that, because it's culture and trying to use culture to maybe influence greater political forces than we can control right now seems to be the only thing that might be able to, that we could even think to do stuff, because obviously you can't vote to change things. You just have two different flavors of the same class. I don't know. Or something may, or there's the other thing that capitalism can't function Another way that I could be wrong is that, space stuff doesn't happen. Space doesn't become the saving grace for capitalism. And we have a major ecological collapse that leads to us to basically force us to change the way that we build our society in a way that is positive, but means that we're living in a sort of like much diminished planet by our own destruction. So that's sort of like, we'll see. Alrighty. Do another question. Is the subtle neoliberalism of someone like Tony Blair preferable to overt neoliberalism of someone like Thatcher? I mean, I guess, because the same policies would happen, but they'd happen slower. Just like how if you were driving off a cliff, it'd be better to be better if you were in a car that was out of control heading towards a cliff. There are more things you can do, or you have more time to figure out how to stop it if you're going 40 kilometers an hour versus 50 kilometers an hour, if that makes sense. Alrighty, what do we got next? You know how back in the 1980s the GOP would justify their cruel policies with an argument based on neoliberal economics? Have they stopped bothering to do that? The other day, Lib podcast guy made a lot of good point. When the GOP were opposing the stimulus checks, they didn't really give an argument why they were doing it. They assumed their supporters would accept not giving suffering people money was right. Yeah, I mean, Trump sort of changed a lot of the political landscape of the United States in a lot of ways, where now overt economic nationalism and basically fascist rhetoric is what the Republican Party uses to maintain its power base. And the neoliberals now, like the die-in-the-wool neoliberals, the people who would have like loved Thatcher for her economic ideas and not just because they hated people from Pakistan, like now have more or less moved to the Democratic Party. Now you've got the Democratic Party is a lot more right-wing now since Trump got elected, because the sort of like Lincoln Project type people have moved into it. So now that you've got like conservative Washington Post columnists and like literal architects of the neoconservative project as prominent and influential voices in the Democratic Party, that like Billy Crystal and stuff like that, like what's it called? Like, and they've also like it's, yeah, it is what it is. The Democratic Party is now embracing essentially a whole flavor of right-wing economics and has actively decided to reject left-wing politics. It has effectively ostracized, it's now changing the primary process to make sure that someone like Bernie Sanders doesn't happen again. And they have intentionally, like through their picks and everything like that, made a very conscious choice to say that left-wing politics are not to be allowed. They gave basically nothing to progressives, so they've cut them off. They think they do not need left-wing politics. And we'll see what happens. What's my favorite D&D setting? You're a Birthright fan? Now you feel super old. Birthright, I don't know too much about Birthright. That's the one where like you run a kingdom or something, right? I don't know too much about it. I'd probably say if I had to pick a D&D setting that I really liked, it would be Eberron. I like a lot of the stuff of Eberron. I run a homebrew setting primarily on my own, and my setting has a lot of my setting is sort of like, what if Eberron had like a massive disaster that resulted in them kind of going back to Forgotten Realms level of technology. And so that's sort of like that's sort of the thing that I'm doing. So As someone pointed out, yeah, there are technological breakthroughs that would also capitalism have a very hard time trying to amalgamate, and that is like 3D printing really taking off, individual manufacturing really taking off in a big way, and some form of virtually unlimited energy. Hey, Zyzord, thank you for the subscription. Thank you. I appreciate it. Some sort of like free energy like fusion power. Those two things would definitely change the game quite a bit. How do I feel about the possibility of a future where the state collapses, most humans die, but the survivors finally live under socialism? It's like 2,500 and there's only 120 million humans, but they're living under communism. How do I feel about it? I mean, I wish that was not the way that we would get there. It's definitely not a future I would like to make happen. I would like to find something else, another way to get to that. But in many ways, I don't want to conflate what I think will happen with what I want to happen. What I want to happen is very different from what I think the future will be like, because it seems like, at least in the West, a lot of the struggle against capitalism is just not going anywhere. But are you implying that the Democrats were ever left-wing in the first place, or is this an internal faction fighting another internal faction? I don't think the Democrats, like, the thing is, American political parties don't actually have strong ideologies. The Republicans do now. The Republicans are basically a fascist party at this point, but they weren't always that way. And the Democratic Party has never really had a strong singular ideology. It's just a group of alliances of different interest groups and constituencies to make some sort of coalition. And there was a time where the Democrats did legitimately make an alliance with the left in order to build a governing coalition. This was essentially what FDR did. FDR, as part of like the early No Deal coalition, literally took socialists and made them part of his cabinet and made them as part of his government and stuff like that. So there was a time where the Democrats did have, the Democratic Party did have a intentional idea of making an alliance with the left. But America's left is so weak right now that they think that, like, they're at a point where they don't even think they have to give them anything at all, and they can still get elected, because they know that there is a powerful incentive to vote for the Democrats no matter who is running, because the Republicans are just such an odious other option. And so they know that the far left is always going to vote for them no matter how bad things get. And so they don't actually need to do anything for them. So now the Democratic Party can be an active anti-left party like they want to be now. So it said Warforged for the win. Yeah, the current one of my current D&D parties that I run on Sundays has a Warforged, a Changeling, and a Kalishtar all in the party. So it's very Eberron, very Eberron. Eastern Europe has some communist potential, even though the far right is in full control. I mean, okay. I think if there's going to be a place for a socialist movement in our society today, it's going to be in the subaltern world. It's going to be in the most exploited places in the world. It's going to be in Africa. It's going to be in Southeast Asia. It's going to be in like, you know, Oceania or whatever, the islands sort of north of Australia but south of Southeast Asia are. Like, if there's going to be a successful socialist movement, it's going to be there. There, socialism is a real thing and not a distant dream. They didn't have the same Cold War dynamic that we had here. And so, and also, they are primarily the place where the global proletariat works. Like the Democratic Republic of Congo has, if they wanted to make a statement, they could shut down coltan and cobalt and like rare earth mineral exports, and could completely fuck up our technology focused economy, or our like computer based economy, I guess I should say. And that is a thing that they could do if they so desired. And so I do think that like that there's a more revolutionary potential in places like that than here in the West, where we are a very comfortable and very even like we're very defeated as a people. FDR was barely a liberal. He just wanted to appeal to the left. I agree. FDR wasn't an ideological ally of the left. What he was someone who realized that there was a large left-wing contingent in America that he wasn't going to be able to win elections without. So he made an alliance with the left and gave them a sizable policy victory in exchange for keeping the Democrats in power. And it worked really well. It was one of the most stable electoral coalitions in history. It led to the only 4-term president. So if the Democrats were ever thinking that they could do that again, they would never lose an election. But they refused to do it because I think now the Democratic Party is becoming more ideological, and it is ideologically focused on sort of like Thatcherism, Reaganism now. It's Thatcherism and Reaganism with like a vague sort of corporate inclusion, like progressive social vision. That's like the ideological driving force of the Democratic Party now, which is like, woke neoliberalism, While the Republican Party has sort of abandoned a lot of its economic policy and has moved straight to like fascism at this point. They don't even try to justify their things anymore. What are your thoughts on the Stargate series? I haven't seen it. The only Stargate thing I've seen is the movie from the 90s. So I don't really know too much about it. Well, if you have a take on the cursed Uyghur discourse right now, I can't make heads or tails of it, and everyone's talking about it right now is embarrassingly incompetent research in the topic. Yeah, all right, I can talk about that. The current Uyghur discourse is terrible because to get a straight answer out of anybody requires languages. You need to know how to speak either Uyghur or Mandarin to be able to really follow what's going on. And there is a strong concerted effort by two of the most powerful countries on Earth to fight out two different narratives over what's going on. So you've got the United States, which is which has a strong, which decided that they don't hate Muslims now and that they are actually fighting to protect the rights of this beleaguered population, which goes into a long history of attempting to Balkanize China to basically undo the communist revolution in China. It's been a U.S. foreign policy goal for a very long time. Whether they are latching onto a real thing that's happening right now is super difficult to tell, really. The sources that they have are pretty sketch. But also at the same time, China is an extremely authoritarian, closed-off society that has also a very strong geopolitical interest in trying to deny the story and are pushing a lot of a denialist narrative about what's going on in Xinjiang. And so at this point, I mean, there's definitely, like, whatever's happening is definitely not great. It's not something I would want to happen to it. And they are definitely people that, like we definitely need to be looking out for what's going on. The problem, though, is that whether there's two incredibly powerful countries trying to either tell us that nothing is happening or that, like, the worst genocide in human history is happening, when, like, I don't know, and I don't have the language skills, and nor do a lot of English language social media people have the language skills to really find out what's going on. And China's not exactly the most, like, open and easy, like, Xinjiang's not exactly the easiest place to get to at the best of times. And so there's troublingly little sources coming out about it. What I would argue is that something like a UN investigation would be the best idea, but China would never agree to that. And so we're kind of like, I'm hoping that that it's not as bad as the US is making it out to be. That's like my current position. Should we oppose space exploration so capitalism can't keep producing itself by leaving Earth? I mean, not the worst idea. I don't think like space colonization and settlement is too close at this point. I think that people who think that we're, like, imminently going to have people living on Mars is, they're being overly optimistic. If we even have people on Mars if we even have, like, the Apollo 11 of Mars missions by the end of the 2030s, I'll be surprised. There is a lot of very big technological hurdles that need to be covered by the time we actually get around to doing such a mission. And it's not like aerospace is getting big, flush with investment money these days. NASA is not getting huge budget increases. You sleep on a rock, but it'll be painted rainbow colors. Yeah, basically. What about Southern Europe? Possibly. Yeah, I mean, Southern Europe, we've already seen, like, with Vox in Spain, that there is probably something to that. The only thing I could think, though, is that if, and this kind of happened with Syriza in Greece, if any sufficiently left-wing government got elected in Southern Europe, they would be limited on how much they could change things by the economic controls of the European Union. Like Greece tried to do something, and, like, Germany basically tried to squeeze it out of existence for trying to do something. So. If you ever want to see what the world would be like if we weren't here, alternate world where human died out thousands of years ago, just see what version of Earth where nature is totally unchecked would look like. Probably be very nice. You saw both the Serfs and Vosh's research into it, and it looks as bad as they say it is. Okay. I don't know. I don't know about what research they've done. I don't trust anything Vosh says, because Vosh has like Sargon of Akkad levels of research intensity, where he might have read the first sentence of the Wikipedia article and that's it. stop. I'm not supposed to talk about him anymore. People get mad at me. Currently, all I managed to discern is that there's an authoritarian nonsense going on. It is drastically worse in Xinjiang and the rest of the country. Yeah. There's something to be said that seeing a minority group as a threat to undermining the state and as something that needs to be controlled or has become the X problem sounds very much like the conditions that led up to the Armenian genocide. So it's definitely something to be concerned about. Like, there was a very strong belief in the Ottoman Empire that Armenians were, they were all Christian extremists that wanted to destroy the Ottoman Empire so they could make their own country, and that they needed to be dealt with in order to make sure that the Ottoman Empire can hold itself together, which and Russia was doing that a little bit. Russia was trying to provoke a little bit, and so it led to a whole lot of people dying. So I would not be surprised. Oh boy. Have I ever read any works by Michael Parenti? I've wanted to. Isn't he the one who made American Fascists or something like that? Is that Michael Parenti? I definitely have some books by him on my to read someday list, but anyways, I gotta take a quick washroom break, so I'm gonna just be gone for about a couple minutes. So real quick, I'll put the music back up so you guys can enjoy that, but I'll just be a couple minutes, don't worry. Alrighty, I'm back. Hello. How has chat gone since I was away? Let's see. Hi. Alrighty. Would I ever do a video on the Assyrians or Hittites? Left to stick on those ancient civilizations would be interesting. It might be. Just might not be for me. It's sort of out of my beat, and I can guarantee that if I made a video on those, that they would not perform very well. Sort of my audience would not watch that, is the thing. There you go. That's a good... You haven't seen Phoebes' face very much. There's Phoebes' face. Aww. Alrighty. Let's see. Vosh is basically Destiny, but center left instead of center right. It acts like he's the king of the online left. Vosh and Destiny both have that very white man tendency where they seem to think that they know everything about a subject they've done zero research on, but because they're white men and have never been told that they're wrong about something, feel perfectly confident to speak at long lengths about subjects they've done like either no or next to no research actually on. Okay. Reject depression, embrace cat. Yeah, I do love cat. She's being very sweet right now. She's not trying to chew on anything. It's very cute. Even if extremism was pervasive in Xinjiang, it is far from a legitimate excuse for collective punishment, is the thing. How old is Phoebe? Phoebe is 11, I want to say. She's 10 or 11. I don't know. She, what's it called? My wife got her before she even met me, so... I think that she said she got her in like 2010 or something like that when she was doing her master's. So, probably about that. Just like a middle-aged cat. Good that she's taken to you. Well, thank you. I give her so much attention is the thing. I am basically obsessed with Phoebe, so. And there's the ultimate trick, which is that I'm the one who is in charge of feeding the cats, and so that makes them like you a lot. Oh, man. Phoebe is a small cat, is the thing, too. She is only 5 pounds, so she is like the cat equivalent of a girl who's like 5'1" and 100 pounds, you know? She's a very petite kitty. So she looks a lot younger than she is. All right, what we got? What we got next? Okay. I put some problematic... this is reactor stuff. The former show. Let's see. How did I discover anarchism? Interestingly, it was early YouTube. I started getting into YouTube in 2007, and I came across a lot of ANCAPs on YouTube. But I was already like pretty much like a very far left-wing person. And so I was just like, but I was like, you know, persuaded by like the criticisms of the state. And so I was just very quickly like, is there such thing as like a left-wing anarchism? And then I Googled it and found out about Kropotkin and everything like that. And so around, gosh, I would have been about 20, 21. I got into, I pretty much came to a conclusion that I was a anarchist, which was in about 2009. I think 2009 was when I became an anarchist. Why is my kitty gotta be so cute? I don't know. She's adorable. She's a good little girl. All right. Let's see what this one is. She's cute. She's also a brat, is the thing. Like, she knows that she has me wrapped around her finger. So she gets away with, like, she knocks a lot of stuff on the ground and that kind of stuff. She's... The other day, Radiolab put out an episode about how these new COVID strains might be evolving in the bodies of immune-compromised people. If that's the case, would it be justification to, like, put all immune-compromised people under house arrest that can't get infected and inadvertently create a new strain? I feel like there are a few things you could do before you go to the nuclear option of, like, you know, first of all, that needs to be verified. You can't just go on a hunch. But second of all, that's an extremely brutal and authoritarian option to, you know, just making sure that we get vaccinated to the point of herd immunity and people practicing social distancing and wearing masks, which should do plenty if we just, you know, applied it universally. If anything, like the much less horrible option is zero COVID, like kind of like what Australia did or not, what New Zealand did, where you do a month-long total lockdown, 100% lockdown, not sort of like this half-assed lockdown like what happened in like Canada and America and you know, the UK. And then once you have your month up, you like you end up getting yourself to zero COVID, and like that you base getting to zero COVID and not managing the growth of it as the important thing. Which last week a study came out and showed that even those who are entirely just about, you know, who care only about money and don't give a shit about, like, you know, people's lives, even by those metrics, you know, COVID zero was a more successful plan. That countries like New Zealand had much less damage to their GDP output than like the United States or Canada or whatnot. But yeah, I don't really want to like put. I never want to be put in a position where you're like taking people who are immunocompromised and putting them under house arrest. That's brutal and terrible and not a thing people should do. COVID's already got people who are immunocompromised basically not able to do anything. So let's not do that. Thank you for the love, Gulashnikov. Gulach? I don't know how to pronounce that, but like every other English town has a Chinese takeaway with Orient somewhere in the name. Is it okay for if the owners are East Asian? I mean, it's not like my favorite thing, but on the like scale of things that are problematic, it's not exactly like the highest on the list. I'd be more interested in attacking the like idea of like, because like I what's it called? I spent a few years with a Chinese student when I was an undergrad, where I was kind of helping her with her English while she was doing work, and the way that she had been taught English is that she still knew a lot of like very like English colonial terms for things. Like she mentioned being from Peking, and I was like, it's okay, we call it Beijing now. Like you don't have to use the weird anglicized term for it. And it was like, oh, like yeah, there's colonization in that process that needs to be addressed more. I think that system of yeah. Are you familiar with Murray Bookchin's work? I am vaguely. I wish to be more interested. Wish to be more like democratic confederalism and stuff like that. I am very interested in learning more about. That's one of my like theory reading project interests for the future. So like that's like that's a thing that I would like to do. Yeah, it's what's it called? It's Murray Bookchin and Abdullah Öcalan. Those are the two people that I like really want to read more about in the next year. Because it's their proposal for a sort of communalist anarchist society that I'm very interested in. Let's see what we got next. Alternate Earth. Thanks to an asteroid after wiping out northern barbarians, the Roman Empire still dominates Europe. Sci-fi story where we find alternate Earth where the Romans dominate Europe. Already bad news. If the Romans still have slavery, it would be unethical for us to open trade relations with them. Yeah. Would trading with a slave society be worse than trading with a particular exploitative capitalist society like China? I mean, slavery is still like not some like you should probably not trade with slaveholders now. What do I think of Scottish independence? If they want it, they should have it. And at this point, I think that they'd be better off if they did it, because it would give them an opportunity to rejoin the European Union. So, but I would not want to do it if it wasn't popular. But it does sound like it is popular. So, see where it goes. Are there any anarchist communist plans that incorporate Dunbar's number? No, not officially. There's what's it called? There's a video by American Johnson and Non-Compete that talks about Dunbar's number in relation to how big commune sizes should be, and what like the, what the largest form of a commune shouldn't be large enough that You are at the point where you're abstracting people rather than having some passing familiarity with every single person. And I do think that that is important. So Dunbar's number, while I don't know how like legit Dunbar's number is today, Dunbar's number is this idea of how many people a person can realistically maintain some form of relationship with. It's about like 100 and some people. I can't remember the exact number right now, but it's basically this like, in the social dynamics of society, you can maintain some form of relationship with this many people at a maximum before people start dropping off. And if in my mind, that is about the largest that a society should be, or that a singular like unity of a community should be, before you're getting into confederalism instead of a commune bigger than a certain thing. In a commune society, would we have to dissolve large cities, or would cities just become thousands of communes? Like, would a skyscraper in New York be one commune? Yeah, that's how I would see it. Communes would be, because the thing is, like, it's not like every commune would have its own, like, space or its own, like, territory. It would just be more like, that these communes would definitely be interacting with each other. An anarchist commune-based society would be extraordinarily interconnected and extraordinarily complex, the relationships of everything. But when it comes to like making meaningful day-to-day decisions, you would have a lot of say over what happens in your own community, because it'd be small enough that you kind of know everybody in that society, and you would be able to participate in it directly. Ukraine started an invasion of the Donetsk People's Republic 1 to 2 days ago. That's another situation, very much like with what's happening in Xinjiang, where you have two extremely powerful superpowers, both making competing claims over who owns what. And I don't know who's spouting bullshit, because I don't speak Russian or Ukrainian. For anyone who doesn't know, Donetsk is a republic, self-declared, unacknowledged republic in eastern Ukraine that is majority Russian-speaking and have claimed independence from Ukraine. And Russia has acknowledged it, but the rest of the world hasn't. And some are claiming that it is, largely Putin trying to balkanize Ukraine so that Ukraine doesn't become a powerful Western ally, and it keeps Ukraine under the thumb of Russia. Sort of like what happened in Crimea and everything. It's sort of like an evolution of that. It's part of the Donbass region. Yeah. You'd be best off asking somebody who is more well-researched on that topic than I am. Be more interested in hearing what like Robert Evans, who's actually been there and covered fighting in that region, would have to say than things I would have to say. Look at this. Look at this kitty. She's being very sweet. She knows the cameras are on, so she has to be very nice. Let's see. Do we have enough time for one more question? Suppose the analytical engine was actually built given the British Empire probably could only ever build like 2 or 3. What do you think they would have actually... Do you think they would have actually been used? I imagine it's like 1866 and the British Empire has 3 functional analytical engines. What are they being used for? My guess is that it would be mostly used for statecraft stuff. Like the early uses of computerized information, or even at that period in the 19th century, you had, even without computers, you had like the institutionalization and like mechanization of the state to manage like, different social programs and different, different government structures and things like that. So things like tabulating censuses, if you think about that, doing that before computers, is very time consuming. And so I would probably say that the first big thing that would come up would be something like that. That would be like what those first things were for. Get behind anarcho-phoebism? Yeah. She's so against hierarchy that she's against the hierarchy of verticality. So all things on tables must be on floors. That's her number one. If I were to say her number one form of direct action is taking things that are on tables and knocking them onto the floor. So that's her. So that's like the main form of direct action I think that she would be into. The second is no cables. We are a completely wireless society. She chews on cables relentlessly. So no cables allowed. Verticality is oppression. Yeah, exactly. Would you ever name a pet after Emma Goldman? If I had a female pet that I was actually able to name, I'd probably name her Emma. That'd be a good name. I don't know. I'm not the only person who gets to decide the name of pets. I am married, and Kelly has more strong opinions about the names of things than I do. So she might not like the idea of me naming a cat or a dog Emma. Were censuses a thing yet in 1866? Yep. Yeah, they were a thing. They were becoming more and more central to the way the 1800s is like when, especially in the UK, the government was becoming more like bureaucratized and more formal and like running programs and things like that. It was sort of becoming what we would call the modern state. So it's not that bad for that was a thing that people were doing, and they were trying to find new and more efficient ways to. When you take the census to try and tabulate it and turn it into useful data, which before the age of spreadsheets would have been pretty difficult. So something like Analytical Engine would have been right at home for stuff like that. And that is sort of where the first big supercomputers found their use, were in like big government data collection and statistics modeling stuff. And then probably the next thing it would move to would be like banks or something, which is also the next place where computers move to. Was that in the late 1940s? Like post World War II, like the first like big computers started moving into use in like statecraft and stuff like that. You're English. It sounds like you have an American accent. I'm Canadian. I live in Canada. All right, it is almost 2 o'clock. We are close. So I'm going to go find someone to raid. Floor good, table bad. There you go. All right, we got a possum queen. Always good. Always good. Always good value. So let's get that raid going, friends. I'll be back tomorrow night for the for Step Back Tonight. And yeah. Take care of yourselves and each other. I'm going to push the button. This is a pretty good stream. I feel like we had a pretty good vibe going. Anyways, be good, be kind, and be Phoebe.